We can ask the question, why have tort law? Next week, we'll be asking something similar about the contract law. So I want to say a little more about the nature of this question. Let's look at the tort law. We can ask the question, why should people have to pay for damage that they've caused? And we could get into all kinds of moral reasons. But I should note that we're asking more than the question, why should people pay for damage that they've caused? We're also asking, why should they be able to bring the law in and bring a lawsuit to get the government to require the other person to pay for the damage that he has caused? In a sense, I'm asking not only why should people act in certain ways, but why should the law be involved in enforcing certain sorts of obligation? It's important to ask that question. There are many cases in which we stop and say, maybe the law shouldn't be involved here. Maybe people should be left to work this out for themselves. Let me give you a couple examples from the television show LA Law. In this first example, a lawyer has gone to speak to a client about her desire to disinherit her children. She has a lot of money and she's decided to leave it all to a TV evangelist. So he goes to talk to her about it. Here's one of the things that she says.
I've known you a long time, Mrs. Lundstrom. You've been involved with the homeless, environmental groups, a whole long list of charities, any one of which you could have given your money to, and yet you chose to give it to the Reverend Billy Bob Thomas, a diamond-studded cable TV preacher. Why?
I have my reasons.
I think I know what they are. If you had chosen any one of these worthy charities, you would run the risk of not hurting your children enough. But by choosing this pulpit thumper, then they really get the message, don't they?
What message would they get if I left them everything? That I'm grateful they never come to see me? That I enjoy eating alone every Sunday? That I relish the hollow echo of an empty hospital room when I'm sick? They come a few times a year, Christmas and Thanksgiving, with the word obligation written all over their faces.
Well, they're grown up. They have their own lives to lead.
I'm still their mother. There's still a few things I can do to punish them.
Look, obviously you can give your money to anybody you want. I just think that this way, the very last testament of Edith Lundstrom is an act of bitterness. I don't think that's right. What you've written here is an ending to a relationship that's not over yet. I would like your permission to tear this thing up.
A lot of us would look at this and say, yeah, that's really bad. The way that the children were treating their mother was wrong. But I suspect that most of us would not want the mother to be able to bring a lawsuit against her children to force them to come and visit her more often. Now, her particular form of retaliation may or may not have been appropriate. The key point that I want to say here is most of us look at this and say this kind of family relationship is something left for the private parties to sort out for themselves without getting the law involved. In fact, one of the lawyers on LA Law makes a similar claim about his client. This is a case that I mentioned in another segment in which a millionaire has brought a lawsuit against someone else involving a dispute over cards. Here's what the millionaire's lawyer says to the jury.
Now, these two gentlemen have taken up 3 days of a California court. 3 days of your lives at great expense to the taxpayers with a silly little dispute over a card game. Oh, yes. He called him names and he hit him with his foot, but come on, nobody got hurt. And it is a disgrace that this case is even before you. You know, it takes over 4 years, ladies and gentlemen, to get a civil lawsuit to trial in Southern California. That means legitimate victims, people who have suffered real tragedies, sit and wait while their cases are backlogged. Backlogged on a docket crowded by stupid little matters like this, where the only things bruised are self-inflated egos. I'm embarrassed to be the lawyer here. My client is an immature 75-year-old child, as is his counterpart, Mr. Henderson. You want to send a message? Don't reward either one of them. Tell the world that litigation should be a last resort. The courtroom is a place to send only those issues which cannot otherwise be resolved. It is not a playground for rich eccentrics to air out their hurt feelings. Shame on both of them, ladies and gentlemen. Let's send them to bed without any supper.
How dare you do that to me?
Well, you gave me no choice.
The lawyer has a good point. It is a waste of public resources. But there's more to it than that. There's also reasons to think that if we go too far in letting people bring private matters into the law, that there's a loss of freedom. Right? There's some reason to think that it's dangerous to let the government get too involved in meddling in people's lives. And to a large extent, we should be allowing private disputes to be settled in a private manner, not through the law. So that means we have to ask the question, why do we take this issue of people paying for damages that they've caused and make it a matter of law? That is, why do we make it possible for people to go to the courts to ask the courts to require another person to compensate them for damages?